Feeling frustrated by a system that responds to symptoms while ignoring root causes, Kimberly McCarthy knew she had to do something. With 20 years of experience as a health and wellness educator, she made the bold leap to go into nursing, and this was driven by her desire to create real, lasting change. I'm Megan Babcock, and in this episode, Kimberly is going to share with us her journey into mental health care and some of the critical gaps she sees and how we treat those struggling with mental challenges. Thank you, Kim, for being here with me. I'm really excited to have this conversation with you.
Yeah, thanks, Megan. Thanks for inviting me. I'm excited to be here.
Absolutely. Well, I'd love if you would just share a little bit about kind of your background and how you ended up where you are today working in the mental health care system as a nurse.
Sure. I actually was a teacher for 20 years in Massachusetts and worked with incarcerated youth. I got my undergrad in health and decided to pursue my master's in education. And I kind of just felt like I was going to be working for another 10 years or 15 years and thought to myself, I felt I needed a change or something different. And I have a lot of friends that are in nursing. My mom was a nurse, and it just felt like the next logical decision for me. So I thought there's a lot of opportunities in nursing. And so I did an accelerated bachelor's program and moved here to Texas from Massachusetts. And kind of fell into mental health, working in a residential facility for kids and teens who are neurodivergent or have mental health challenges. So yeah, and I have to say, I feel with my experience in the juvenile justice system, I feel like there was, a lot of the patients, or I should say, the students I worked with, the population I worked with, definitely had some mental health challenges, whether or not it was they were diagnosed or not diagnosed. But yeah, so I've always had a passion for mental health and for that population, the younger population, and I just feel like there's such a need for care for them because it feels like it's a population that's kind of neglected, and it seems like it's continuing to escalate. And whether it's COVID and just society and the expectations we have on young people, but I definitely am seeing just a higher prevalence in mental health issues and anxiety and depression and eating disorders and substance use and all of it.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I agree. It feels we're in kind of a crisis with our mental health and our youth. I have kids ranging from ninth grade to my oldest is 22. My husband has three older kids in their 20s. I can see a big difference between the younger ones that had a lot more access to social media, and there seems to be a higher
Mhm.
rate of being a bully, when you can hide behind a screen and say things. Um, Also, just a lot of competition. Like, when we're on social media, I know that's one of my things about social media that I struggle with because in my own life, I went through some really hard things, but no one would ever know because you post only the amazing parts of your life. And so that comparison of like, wow, my life doesn't look like that. And I have to remind even clients I work with, you are comparing the backside of your life to the collated version that someone is wanting to show you on social media. And so that comparison is really impacting our mental health, I think. And just like our physical health, it seems to me, and you're the expert, so I'm going to let you talk a little bit about some of the gaps, but we are very symptoms focused. So, okay, anxiety, let's just treat the anxiety. We have medication for that. And even maybe we put them in counseling, but there's so many different types of counseling and resources that often we don't try different things when
Mhm.
one thing's not working. I know in my own life, I spent a lot of years in counseling and I wasn't getting anywhere. For me, I was sitting there speaking to someone who was an expert. I'd come in, kind of talk about the same things repetitively, and talk therapy for my situation where there was trauma involved was actually re-traumatizing. And I was looking at this expert to solve what is my problem, versus when I started working with someone who was more of a coaching and had a similar story and was able to understand me and share with me a little bit about their story and how they overcame it. It was so powerful because it allowed me to not look to someone else to solve my problems, but to help me kind of explore and figure out what would help me as an individual. So tell me a little bit about what are some of the gaps that you see impacting either your patients, or even, I know you're as a coach, you're working with this demographic of teens and young adults.
Yeah, gosh, I guess I feel like there's so many gaps. I mean, like you had mentioned, I think, there's the naivety around social media. And like you had mentioned, I think we've talked about social media before, and our just love-hate relationship with it. But I think, we're adults and we understand the implications, and like you said, we know why people are posting and that people are showing their best face. And but I do think that, we're not, a lot of teens just are not comprehending that and not seeing that. So they're really focused on social media and focused on what their peers are saying. And like you said, there's a lot of bullying. I feel like there's a lack of education in schools. I mean, I'm hearing more about, mindfulness and, different programs being brought into schools for teens, but it still feels like, they're far and few between. And then even I work in a residential program. And so we have, we're pretty resourced, but even
Mhm.
there, I feel like when we think about the nutrition piece isn't really there. The physical, there's not much of an emphasis on movement or physical health or yoga or mindfulness. And so I think bringing other modalities in would be really helpful. And I'm just not really seeing that. And even like you said with therapy, talk therapy, I think there's DBT, there's CBT, there's EMDR, there's so many
Mhm.
different types. And I think, we need to kind of see what works. Every patient's going to be different and their needs are going to be different. And you did say something which I find really important is, I think there's that piece of, you had mentioned that you need to do the work. And I
Mhm.
think a lot of times with therapy and with the population that I work with, they sometimes they don't want to do the work. They're kind of also looking for that quick fix.
Right.
So when they're struggling, I might ask them, what coping skills are you using? And they're like, they don't work for me. Or, I just want a PRN. And that's something that commonly happens. And so I think, I mean, we all want quick fixes sometimes,
Mhm.
but I think, like you said, it's just not, it's definitely having a negative impact, and it's just not helping them progress and move forward and learn those skills that they need to learn to move through life and be
Yeah.
navigate challenges, and yeah, and be successful and thrive.
Well, for those of you who aren't familiar with what PRN means, that's an as needed. So I'm assuming that's like a medication, like an anxiety medication when you're feeling anxious and
Mhm.
and wanting to take something to kind of take that edge off. And we can use a PRN. It could be alcohol, for some it's food. For me, I thought, oh, I don't have a problem with unhealthy coping mechanisms. Well, what I didn't realize was my need for control, my desire to have everything perfect in my cleaning. And it wasn't until I started really looking at, when I move into those behaviors, what's happening with me, because all of those things are an avoidance of what you're experiencing. Unfortunately, avoidance never allows us to move through it, which is what you have to do to have resolution, integrate your experience, and be able to develop your resilience. And so I really agree with you that it is time that one, even as parents, I mean, I wish I had known what I do now because of my own journey and journey with my kids. I in my first season, I had an episode where I talked with my son, who at the time was 21, is now 22, about how my own trauma impacted him, resulted in unhealthy coping mechanisms with drugs and alcohol, resulting in him going to a therapeutic boarding school, and how he had to work through his own emotions and angers to get to the point to take personal responsibility. So, if you're looking for a story that can encourage you about what's possible with your child, I would definitely encourage you to go back and listen to podcast episode number 2 and hear a really honest conversation between a mom and their son who have had this journey together. What was really powerful about that was my own healing journey. And so sometimes we can look at our younger generation and say, what's wrong with you? Right? Well, it's really important that as parents, as medical care providers, as people in the community, that we recognize when we're seeing these things that we played a role in it. And so oftentimes we even need to step back and look at what are we doing that could be impacting those closest to us, and how can we develop better skills? Because as I learned how to deal with my anxiety and get out of a domestic violence relationship, I was modeling some different behaviors for my kids that they were able to start learning.
Yeah.
So I love that you have this experience from all of those years of working in the incarcerated space, but now taking that into your work in your residential treatment home. But I'm really looking forward to this next episode where we talk about your own journey and how your eyes were opened to the power of mindfulness. So let's close it up here for listeners. Come back and join us, and you're going to get to hear how Kimberly also integrated not just her experience as a teacher and an educator, a nurse, but her own personal experience that really allows her to have a holistic approach to healing. If you enjoyed what we're talking about, if you have family members that are struggling with their mental health, would you share this episode so that we can encourage people to talk about this subject? Because we cannot change things that we're not willing to reveal and talk about. Don't forget to subscribe to It's Your Story to Tell so you can be aware of all of our episodes. This season is a great one where we are talking about people making a difference in our communities so that we can have better health mentally, physically, emotionally, and spiritually. Thanks, Kim, for being here, and look forward to talking more with you in this next episode.
Thanks, Megan.